Today, we're going to do something that's a little bit different and kind of fun. We are going to build a web-based dashboard for a Notehub project, and we are going to do so without writing any code, or at least we're going to attempt to. I've been playing with a lot of AI-based editors over the last week or two, and I've been pointing them at Notehub projects, and I've been pretty astounded at what I've been able to build. I've worked with different trackers, I've built dashboards and charts and graphs, and I've been impressed at what I've been able to do just by telling AI some really simple commands. So today, what we're going to attempt to do is we are going to use one of these AI-based tools called Cursor, which I will talk about in a minute. And we will use it to build a dashboard for a project, a Notehub project I have for monitoring CO2 levels in my house. Essentially, it is a Notehub project where I have 4 devices running in my home, and each of these is publishing hourly events where I'm getting CO2, humidity, temperature, and voltage. Now, I've previously built a dashboard for this project by hand. It just looks a little something like this. And because I have some background in web development and some web development skills, what I want to show as part of this video, this is aimed at people that don't have a web background. So maybe you know how to get devices to report data, but you want to take that data and turn it from this into something that looks a little something like this. And honestly, I think we're probably going to build something that looks a little bit better than what I built by hand, which is cool and also a little bit concerning as well. So let's see how it goes. All right, let's start by talking about Cursor. Cursor is a fork of Visual Studio Code. If you've used Visual Studio Code before, it's going to feel familiar. It is an AI-based editor, so it is a full-on text editor, but a lot of its features are more oriented towards these sort of AI workflows and using AI to build up applications. It is an editor that you can download for Windows, for Mac, and for Linux. And it also has a pretty generous free tier. You actually get a 2-week trial of their Pro plan. So it's a great one if you want to follow along with this video. I highly encourage it to try this out for yourself. It's pretty easy to download and install. Once you have Cursor installed and running, it's going to look a little something like this. I have this open on a completely blank folder, so I created a folder called CO2-monitor. I opened it up in Cursor. And this is divided into 3 different panes. So you have any files that make up your project here. You have a text editor in the middle. And then this right pane is where we're going to be spending most of our time. This is where you interact with an AI-based agent. I have this set to Claude 3.5. Claude 3.7 is out, but I find that it runs a little bit slower, and Claude 3.5 does everything I need. So that's what I'll be using with this video. You can try out different LLMs if you would like. And then the other thing I want to note before we get started, if you go into your Cursor settings, which for me on a Mac is Cursor settings, and in here, if you visit the rules section, Cursor allows you to predefine different rules that its LLM, basically its chat pane over here, should take into account. And I built in some of the things I've learned as I've been experimenting with building AI-based tools for Notehub project. So I'm telling Cursor about the Notehub API, where it's documented at, some things about the Notehub event API, where to store the secrets, the client ID and client secret for Notehub in a specific file, how timestamps work in the Notehub API. So if you want to use these rules for yourself, if you're following along, I'm going to have a link to my rules in the description so that you can just get a copy and paste friendly way of pasting in these own rules. You don't need these, but I find that they help with some common pain points you might hit as you're trying to use AI tools to build Notehub-based projects. All right, so I'm going to close that out. And then the first thing I'm going to tell this tool is build a web app that reads events from a Notehub project and displays them on the screen. I like to start with a really simple prompt like this. We can get more ambitious from there, but I find that this is a nice sanity check to make sure that our app is actually able to communicate with Notehub. You'll see that one of the first things we're going to have to do is provide our credentials, our basically our OAuth token, so that the Notehub API from this web app is able to communicate with our Notehub project. But at the moment, you'll see that what Cursor is doing is it's breaking this command that we gave it to into a series of things that it's going to do, into a series of tasks. So it's scaffolding out a web application. It read our rules and it knew that I wanted it to create a .env file for all the configuration we're going to need for our project. It's going to go through and do a number of other tools to scaffold and build this up. Sometimes these steps, especially some of the initial steps when it's actually generating everything, can take a few minutes. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to attempt to not cut any segments from this point forward in the video, because I want to show you that I truly am building up this project from scratch and from nothing. But because this tool can sometimes take a while to work, what I will do is sometimes just fast forward us to the ends of different steps to keep this video digestible and a little bit easier to follow. So I will see you in a minute when it gets done with this step. All right, so it looks like it finished. It tells us a little bit about what we do. It's telling us what we need to do to use the app. So it's telling us to replace the placeholder files in our environment file, which we will do first, and then start the development server, which it actually already did over here. I'm going to take my terminal command and drag this to the bottom, because sometimes this will show logs of the app while it's running, and sometimes we need to use some of that. You can accept all the changes that Cursor makes with this accept all button. So Cursor shows you this those pending changes with that sort of green red syntax. But if you just want to take everything it shows, which usually I do because they also provide ways you can roll those changes back in this pane as well. Usually I just end up hitting that accept all button, which just saves all our changes and applies them automatically. So our web app is running at this URL, which we could visit. But for this to actually work, we have to provide these values so it knows which Notehub project it's going to read from, and so that it has the appropriate authentication to do it. So if we go back to our browser and our Notehub project, if you go to the settings, you can grab the first piece of config right up top, our project UID. It's also available in the URL, so you could copy and paste it from there also, but I'll head back to Cursor and we'll paste that in. And then for the client ID and client secret, it's available in the settings pane as well, just down by the programmatic API access. You can generate access and then grab this ID and the secret as well. And as this sort of says, keep this secret somewhere safe. You won't be able to access this secret again. This is also not a value that you want to expose to other people as well. That is why I'm putting this in this special env file, and why I'm also ignoring it from source control as well, because you don't want to expose this, because this really is giving your app and all the other people, if they got a hold of it, the ability to change things, to read from your Notehub project and also write to it as well. So you want to be careful about this value. But providing this means that our project now should be able to work. So now that we have these changes, let's go ahead and move this to the side, move our browser to the side. And if we visit this, we will see things work. And there, what do you know? First try. This doesn't always work first try. In fact, most of the times I've attempted this, it really doesn't. But the cool thing about Cursor, and I'm sure we'll hit some errors and have to do this, is that if things don't work at this point, you can take your errors and basically just copy and paste them into the chat pane, and it will attempt to fix them. And sometimes you need to do several rounds of that, and we will see how it goes. But this time, things worked, and it partially worked because I had those Cursor rules. So I'm telling it things that the AI has commonly stumbled over, so that hopefully if you're following along, you can get this to work on the first attempt as well. But you're seeing that basically at this point, we have just a list of our events. So similar to what we are seeing here with CO2, humidity, temperature, voltage coming in now in our web application. And like I said, I like to do this as a sanity check, but once you have this data, then you can start doing some more interesting things. So I can say, for example, instead of list of events, show, it's funny, I always feel like I need to use proper grammar and spelling when it's really not necessary at all, but show a graph for each data item in the body. Use line charts draw one line for each device. So we'll give it this. We'll see what it does with this. I've had it play with charts before, and I've been pretty impressed. This is one thing that AI, I think, is quite good at. So again, this is going to trivialize some of the things that are normally hard about web development. So it picked out a charting library. It installed it for us. It's going to know the syntax for the charts really, really well. Where it sometimes stumbles is mapping the specific events into the charts and getting things like the timestamps right. But we'll see. We'll go ahead and let this finish up and we'll see what it looks like. All right, so it's just finishing up. It looks like it's finishing some linting errors, but you can see that right off the bat, this did pretty darn well. So we have CO2 for our devices. We have humidity. It's just changed some of the colors, which is interesting. We have temperature and we have voltage. And honestly, for a first go at this is looking pretty good. This looks fairly accurate. I have one of my devices that's outdoors, so I expect the CO2 there to be lower and more consistent. I have one in my office, which is probably this one, that has been going up throughout the day. Same sort of thing. Temperature would make sense. I have one that was colder overnight and is going up. And overall, this is looking quite good. I think I'm going to let this finish. And then the next thing I'm going to do is start to configure some of these charts a little bit also. Oh, this got confused. So it's trying to start the app again, even though it's already running. Sometimes these things, sometimes these tools behave a little bit weird, but honestly, thinking about the amount of time it would take to manually create these charts myself, and I haven't written a single line of code, I think this is pretty impressive and pretty cool. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to say display the charts. Well, let's say make the charts look more professional. And I'm going to say use use the device's best ID. Well, we'll say it this way, use the best ID field from events to determine the device's name you show on the charts. When you use these tools, it is helpful, even if you don't know much about the code that's actually going into this project, it does help to know a bit about your data. So the more familiar you are with how Notehub works, it will help you when building these apps. So for example, I knew that in these events, in the JSON, the best identifier for a device is in this best ID field, which is going to help the AI correctly choose this field. And what I'm hoping it does is it changes these labels so that instead of seeing these sort of cryptic device UID identifiers, instead I see names like bedroom, outside, and the names that I've assigned through this identifier. And we'll see how it does. We'll check back in here in a minute. All right, so it finished this step, so I'm going to accept everything. I am getting an error. I'm going to refresh in the browser to see if the error is still there, because sometimes it just gets stuck that way. And if the error is still there, I will just feed it into the tool. We'll give it a second. It might also be stuck. So sometimes you can kill it, this command running, and then I'll hit up on my keyboard and just run this again and try refreshing that. And we'll see if it loads. And so it does load. It does not look like this worked because I am not seeing, these charts do look a little bit nicer. So I asked it to make the charts look more professional. I kind of like the colors that it picked. We need to play with the spacing a little bit, but I need to tell it to fix the identifiers. It looks like you still are using device and not best ID from the events. We'll have it try again to see if it can fix that, and we'll check back in. Real quick, I do find it amusing to talk to this thing because, like, looking at the code, you're right. While I added this function that used best ID, I need to know, I don't know. I just find its responses kind of amusing sometimes. So it is really stuck on this one. It still does not want to use this. So I'm still not seeing best ID. I see the value from the device field instead. Please fix. We'll see if that works any better. So it looks like it worked. It's still thinking about, I don't know, I did not do anything different. So apparently I just had to keep asking. I found that that's true of these tools sometimes, which is a little bit frustrating. One thing it does a lot, I've noticed, is it'll add logs to the code and then it'll kind of read its own logs because it has access to server-side logs to try to figure it out. So sometimes you just have to ask it a few times and it almost debugs it like a human would, where they'll add some logging, look into the logs, implement it. But the result of this is, oh, it just rebroke it. So it had it for a second where I was actually seeing the correct names, and then it managed to break it again. I wonder if we refresh. No. Ugh. All right. So let's see. Try running the console logs will help us see exactly where the best idea is located. The event logs, if you could share a sample of what you expect versus what you're seeing. All right, so I will be very explicit. So I will say, I'm seeing dev. I'll fast forward this bit, but I'll show you what I'm typing. All right, so I'm saying it's asking me to share what I'm seeing versus what I'm expecting. So I'm telling it I'm seeing this and I expect to see outside. But what you can also do is you can highlight a bit of this. So I can put this and I can add it to the chat. So it has this context explicitly so that it's able to look at what it logged and specifically see that. And I'm telling it what I'm seeing and what I shouldn't be seeing. And so there you go. Best idea is at the root level of the event and not in the body. So it was expecting to find it in the body and it was able to fix it that time. So this is the kind of frustrating part of working with these tools, is that sometimes it's almost like a completely different workflow. And you can get stuck at steps like this. For me, event parsing has been the biggest source of confusion where it gets stuck on it. But it's kind of cool that we're still able to do this. So, I mean, this still only took a few minutes and I've now got charts that we can view. So what I want to do next is I want to say, I want the charts to be a bit less wide so that they fit to 2x2 on medium size screens. So I think they're a little bit wide right now. I want to make this more digestible and we'll see if it adds a little formatting. And I'm going to try to clean up the entire app as well. So we're going to add some headers and such after that. So let's give this a second to finish. All right, so it's starting to do this. This looks, I like the sizing of it. So it goes from 2 charts down to 1. The charts aren't quite as pretty, so maybe I will have to ask them to make them a little bit bigger, but this is not bad. Would you like me to adjust the grid spacing or the chart height further? So I will say, yes, I would like the charts to be a bit bigger while still fitting 2x2. Let's give it something else. Also make the headings of the charts look more professional. And let's see what it does with that. So that's a little better, but not a lot better. It didn't really change the headings at all. So we'll come back to that, but let's give it something else to do. I want to make the header look better. So give the app a better header. Put a new name for the app in the header. Give the app a name and logo of a trendy startup. Let's see what it does about that. I'm trying to get rid of these just really boring headings up here. All right, so it looks like we are building Air IQ now, smart air quality monitoring. Honestly, that looks pretty darn good. I like that header quite a bit. We hit some air, but it looks like it might still be finishing this. So let's see what happens. Oh, it's even telling me there seems to be a linter error about the node. Would you like me to fix that as well? We'll just say yes, see what it does. And so this fixed it for a second, and then now see, sometimes this thing gets a little bit confused. So it's again trying to change our env file and just get rid of the changes. So what I'm actually going to tell it to is reject that, because I don't know why it's trying to do that. This is again where these tools aren't perfect. You kind of have to keep tabs on what they're doing. It saw an error with however it was adding processing for the Notehub events, and it decided it wanted to overwrite our credentials, which isn't going to work. So I told it to take that out. And at this point, I think we are in pretty good shape. So the next thing I want to do is get a little bit more data back. So it's kind of cool that I can view 1 day's worth of data, but I want to see more. So I'm going to tell it to get back 5,000 events. And through a little bit of trial and error, I found that the best way to get back Notehub events or lots of Notehub events is through this approach, through the /events API and using the page size parameter. Just because I found through previous attempts that sometimes when you tell it, I want a month's worth of data, it sometimes gets really fixated on that and adds some really complicated date code, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. So you're welcome to play around with that, but I'm trying to keep things pretty simple for this video. So hopefully this will just change it to just get back more data and show a lot more data in the charts. And then if this works, we'll work on adding some more filters. So it did work because you can instantly see we now have an absolute ton of data on these charts. And so it's finishing something up. This is kind of interesting to see in and of itself. But what I wanted to do next is add some quick client-side filters to the top of the charts, allow users to choose between seeing data from the last 24 hours, last, let's say, 3 days, last 7 days, last 14 days, and last month. And we will see how that works. All right, so I like the filters. These look really good. However, they don't look like they work. So I'm going to tell it the filters look great, but I see no data on the charts. And we'll see what it does with that. And this is looking good. So it made all the device is the same color, which I don't love, but we'll see. But let's see if these filters work. And it certainly looks like they work. Last 3 days, last 7 days, last 2 weeks, and the last month. That is quite good. What does it default to? So if I refresh this, defaults to last 24 hours, which is also exactly what I'd want it to do. So let's see if we can fix those colors. So I'm going to say use each device should have its own color and use that same color across charts. We'll see if it can fix that one up. And it totally nailed that. So I've got different devices in different colors. It even added this little border, which I like quite a bit. So I can see, yeah, voltage. I mean, this looks really, really good. The only thing I'm seeing at this point is I don't love this. So visually change the heading to use, I'll say proper notation. I'll see if I can figure it out. I want the like subscript for the two. And visually say temperature instead of temp the UI. We'll see if we can clean those up just because those are a little bit icky looking. All right, so it totally nailed that as well. I see CO2 exactly as I want and temperature. And honestly, at this point, like we could keep going. There's tons of features that we might want to add to this, but this is a pretty impressive looking dashboard. And I mean, this pains me a little bit because this version that I built took me, I'm not even gonna reveal, I guess, how much time this took me, but several days of hand coding. And I've got my timer now on, I've been recording this for about 36 minutes. And I already have something that looks nicer, that provides more value, honestly. Like these tooltips look a little bit better. These filters are way easier to use than what I have in mine. And this all just totally works. And this blows my mind a little bit. I even got a nice little logo. I've got an app name. I don't know. I think this is really, really impressive. And true to word, I'm pretty sure I have not actually written a line of code. In fact, I probably would have been better off in this video just hiding this segment altogether that shows the files, because all I've had to do is interact with the chat pane. And what's awesome about this is that not only do I have essentially a viable app here, this is just a straight up web application. And it's easy to take an app like this and host it. So one reason why, if you think back to the cursor rules that I had open earlier, I had asked it to create this as a Next.js app. And part of the reason I did that is Next.js is just a really popular framework and really easy to host. So if you wanted to take this idea and fully even just deploy this out there, I thought for the last few steps in this video, I would cover how to do that. So I'm going to do that by closing all of this stuff out, and we'll close this up, close this down as well. And what I'm going to have to do is commit all of this code to a Git repository. So what I can do that in here through this user interface. And this is source control. So this is just storing where my files are at. And I'm just going to say initial commit and do that. There are no stage commits. Would you like to stage all your changes? Yes, I would. Go ahead and do that. I am going to publish this. I think it's going to prompt me for my GitHub credentials. So I'm going to give that. All right, so I just had to go through the clone. So I'm just it's gonna ask me if I want to do this privately or publicly. I'm just gonna make this public and push that out there. And if I open this, I now have a project that is up on GitHub. And from here, there are a lot of services that let you take your project from GitHub, whether it's public or private, and push it out to a hosting service. My personal favorite is a service called Netlify. This is another service that has a very generous pricing plan for a very generous free plan. So you can easily deploy sites from GitHub repositories. So if you sign in for that and you log in, you can go ahead and say add new site. And I will say import from an existing project. We're going to deploy from GitHub, which is going to bring in my repos over here. And if we search for CO2 monitor, we should, this search is taking a while. Yep, just now we just added, it is public. I will deploy it. So site name, the site name is the default URL of your device or of your project. And what did AI call our site? AirIQ, so we'll go with that. We will be airiq.netlify.app. For build settings, Netlify is pretty smart. So it detected that we're using Next.js automatically. So the rest of this config should be fine. we will need to add environment variables. So if you remember back, and I'll bring that up over here, I put these configuration files in this .env file. So .env is short for environment. These are the necessary credentials for your application to run. The reason I put this in a .env file is those files were excluded from source control. So if you go back to your GitHub project, notice that this env file is not here. The reason for that is you don't want people to know the values of these. So you have these values locally. So any host you have also has to have these values. So I'm going to go ahead and add these, and I'll fast forward this bit of the video so that, you don't have to watch me copy and paste for the next 20 seconds. All right, so we have our values in, we have our config, and we will just go ahead and deploy this site. And if this all works, which sometimes we'll hit some errors as part of this process, it's hard to say what we will hit. But if all works, we will just get a URL where we can view our dashboard. So let's give this a second to run, and we'll see where this goes. All right, so our build did fail because we have some compilation errors. And so what I'm going to do is, again, to try to keep this as a no-code process, I'm just going to take these errors and tell our AI about them and see if they can fix them. And then what we'll have to do is we'll have to recommit these changes. And the cool thing is Netlify will automatically detect that commit, and we'll just attempt to rebuild it again. So we'll have to see if AI can fix this, and hopefully we can just get this running pretty quickly. All right, so it looks like it worked. I went ahead and ran a build locally, which is basically what Netlify is going to do over here to try to save us some time. So you'll see it made 2 changes. So I'm going to add these changes, say these are build fixes. We'll commit those and we'll sync it up. And when those changes go to our site, you'll see that Netlify Auto picks up on it. It is deploying it. We can watch our deploy log, and let's see if this is successful this time. All right, so it looks like, oh, there we go. It totally worked. So we did have to make one change. We had to have that fix a build error. But check this out. So erroriq.netlify.app is totally live. I'll have it in the description. You can check it out as well, because this is an app that's constantly running and pushing data. And I mean, this looks pretty darn decent. I'm pretty impressed as what we were able to do. And just to review real quick, I mean, we built this using entirely AI, so I did not write a single line of code through the process. And I also built this completely for free as well. So we used the free tier of Cursor to go through the entire building process, the free tier on Netlify to actually host this application. And I built something that looks pretty darn decent, in my opinion, that provides some, I don't know, I think really cool functionality. So if you're the type of person that you have a Notehub project, or you've been working with some devices and you're kind of overwhelmed by the process of putting a little web application together for your device, whether you want to build charts or graphs, or you're working with GPS tracking data, or you want to actually send data down to your device, I highly recommend checking out this workflow, because you might be surprised at what you could build. I certainly have been. I've been kind of dumbstruck going through this process. So check it out. Again, everything you should need is in the description. And if you have any questions about this, or you want to chat about it at all, let me know in the comments. Thanks.